Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the B++ podcast, a podcast where we speak to founders and CEOs and we try to understand how they are helping the businesses, consumers, and the community. And today we are very honored to have Sharon Melamed, who is the founder and managing director of Matchboard, matchboard.com.au. You should go check it out. We are going to start using this service very soon. And it's one of those really incredible stories of how a visionary founder can be ahead of their times and think of something which the world wasn't ready for. So welcome, Sharon. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Abhii. I'm really honored to be here.
Yeah, and we've been reading up about, the multi-award winner Matchboard and the multi-award winner Sharon Melamed. So tell us a bit more. How did the journey start and how did you think of Matchboard long before the left and right swipes of the dating world?
Yes, well, it's interesting. Matchboard actually started in September 2012, which was exactly the same month that Tinder started, which we've all heard of. And funnily enough, before I met my husband, I did myself, I confess, have 3 months experience on a dating site, which turned out not to produce a husband, but to produce an idea for my business Matchboard, which is like a business equivalent of a dating site. So what we do is we match up buyers with suppliers of a whole variety of business services, ranging from digital marketing to call centers to offshore staffing. And I started this business 8 years ago really to solve a problem, I guess, like any entrepreneur wanting to provide a solution to make people's lives better. I saw a problem which probably most of your listeners have experienced, which is the frustration you get when you go on a search engine, you type in a few keywords, and you get like 1 million results served back at you. And you're like, oh my God, what do I do with all this? Do I just stick with the ones on page one that are probably very good at SEO or have a budget to advertise to be there? But are they really the perfect match for my needs? And really, it's an incredible effort to scroll through all the options to try to work out who's a good fit for your particular need. So I saw the idea of putting in filters rather than keywords. Just like on a dating site, you might put in, tall, dark, handsome, whatever. You can put filters in a business sense, like, what's the service you need? What's the budget that you have? What's the location you're in? What's the industry experience you require? And really narrow down that list of perfect match results to a manageable handful. So that's the concept of Matchboard.
Well, that's a fabulous concept. And like I said, I didn't know about Matchboard, till our team was researching, and then we found out about Matchboard. And my first instinct was I sent the link to our marketing and sales teams, and I said, we have to start using this service. So I can absolutely understand, how useful it is. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it's, two birds with one stone, because like you rightly mentioned, usually, the internet searches are sort of victims of who has the SEO budgets and whose websites are absolutely, SEO optimized and who is spending all that money. But there are a lot of quality providers out there. So in a way, it's a great lead gen tool for suppliers as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So for some of the suppliers we work with, and we work with several hundred, we are their primary source of new business. For others, who might be extremely picky about the sort of leads they get, it might be 1 or 2 clients a year that they win through the platform. But what we are very particular about is providing value to the suppliers that sign up, and making sure that every year they're getting new business to stay engaged with our platform. Because there are a lot of marketplaces out there, particularly in the B2B world, where they might have 10,000, 20,000, or even millions of suppliers, but then they only have a tiny percentage of that, maybe 10% of that number, as buyers, which means that the majority of people on the platform who supply a service are not getting any value. And that just doesn't seem right to me. So we have an internal KPI that 85% of our new suppliers receive new business within the first 3 months of joining Matchboard. It's always a chicken and the egg with these two-sided marketplaces, but both sets of customers, the buyers and suppliers, are equally important, and we show our love and our dedication to both.
I mean, that's fabulous in the sense, very rarely do we hear things like KPIs to help out, the target group. So that's wonderful. And like you said, you started the business, to solve a problem. And I think you've somehow magically managed to maintain that over the years. So that's very refreshing to hear. And I just wanted to understand a bit more about the business model and the monetization model, if you could talk to us a bit more about it.
Yes. So when I started Matchboard, I very much wanted to put skin in the game and back myself with the idea of this business matchmaking, and say to the suppliers, you only have to pay us if you win a deal.
Right.
Whereas most of the other platforms around the world that are in this type of space charge their suppliers per lead.
Right.
So every time they match them with a lead, they pay a fee, regardless of whether that lead is a tire kicker or, a junk lead. And that just didn't seem right to me. And when I spoke to the market, and that's absolutely what you've got to do when you start a business, is speak to the potential customers, is ask them what model suited them. And everyone told me, look, we are going to pay you on success, and we're happy to pay handsomely. We're sick of paying per click and per lead, and that sort of approach, which has not so much a correlation with actual outcomes. And just before I was launching the business, I was consulting with a number of very experienced business people, getting their feedback as well. And they told me I'm absolutely crazy with this model because I'm trusting suppliers to report their wins, which happen offline. And people are going to be dishonest and forgetful. And so I really thought hard about that. Because basically they were pushing me down the line of, you've got to charge per lead. So I launched with both models, but my heart was always in the pay on success model and backing myself. And I really disproved those critics of that model because people were honest. That's the refreshing conclusion of the business, is that the suppliers we work with, they report back their wins to us. We monitor, we follow up with both sides, and we know when business has been won. And it's such a refreshing conclusion that people are more honest than you think. So I rapidly phased out that per lead model within 6 months of launching the business. I think probably what gave me confidence to launch this trust-based model is that I worked with the Japanese for 15 years. I actually speak Japanese amongst a few other languages. And in their culture, in their business culture, there's a lot of emphasis on relationships of trust and building that trust over the long term. And so I think that's what ultimately pushed me over the line with this trust model. And 3,500 clients later, I can truly say it's worked, and the proof is in the pudding.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, people give small businesses a lot less credit than what's due. And there's no reason to be cynical about their integrity. And I mean, running, a company, I can tell you the same journey we've been through in terms of wondering why should we pay somebody for a lead. And like you rightly mentioned, the lead may not be a high quality lead, not pre-qualified. And, then there are businesses out there which will charge you for a meeting. And it just feels so transactional. And I have not met a single company who would not be happy to pay a referral fee or a success fee, like you mentioned. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad you listened to your heart and, struck out the per lead model and stuck with this. And like you said, yeah, the proof of the pudding after 3,500 companies is so wonderful to know. And the other question that I had, I mean, before I jump into the next business question, is I was reading that you could speak 6 languages, if I'm not wrong. What are those languages?
Okay, so it's 5.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I have a passion for learning about other cultures.
Right.
And I sort of decided at a young age the only way to really do that is to learn the languages that are spoken in those cultures.
Mm.
So I studied Japanese, German, and French
Oh.
at university and linguistics. I became a government accredited translator in Japanese and German. I then went on to learn Hebrew. And so together with English, that makes 5 languages. And I really think the languages provide that entree into other cultures, which in turn make you a more open, diverse-minded thinker. And in business, I guess that's a good thing, that you're always open to new ideas, to new approaches. And having lived and worked in 5 countries, I've really tried to take the best of each culture or country I've been exposed to. So I mentioned earlier that from Japan, I got that trust instinct in business. From my 10 years living in New York and San Francisco, I got a taste for the scale of business, the opportunity that's out there in the world, and also the speed at which people make decisions, which for better or worse, it's much slower in Australia. So that did frustrate me when I came home to Sydney, which is my hometown, after spending all that time overseas. And I lived in Israel for 9 months, which really gave me the entrepreneurial bug. And it was after I came back from Israel that I really decided to start out with my own business, having spent 20 years in the corporate sector.
Wow, that's quite an incredible journey. And yeah, absolutely, I agree. I mean, I absolutely am terrible at learning new languages. So I have a lot of respect for people who can. Even if I try to learn a few languages, and I have tried and failed miserably, so I can absolutely.
I'm sure not. I'm sure you're being modest there, Abhii.
No, not at all. I mean, it's just that, I guess I just don't have the knack for it, or maybe I don't have enough people to sort of practice it with or something. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, there's so much that we can learn from, sort of different cultures, and something that we are trying to do as well, trying to build, cross-border teams. And, the one thing that I feel very excited about is, not only just the cultural nuances, but also the fact that, everyone brings something to the table. So a team in Eastern Europe, brings some degree of, that let's go get it attitude. And, our team in the Philippines, they're always a happy bunch, and they are always, so friendly, and they have a very positive outlook towards work and life. And our team in Singapore, for instance, is very detail oriented, and they get into the specifics. So I mean, it's just so fabulous, and I think it's so important for an entrepreneur, and for all the young entrepreneurs listening in. What Sharon said is something, we must absolutely try and live in a few different countries and try to get the best of all these different regions and economies. And now that there are so many digital nomad visas, I think it's easier than ever to do some of these things. So moving on to our conversation about Matchboard, what's next for Matchboard in terms of are you growing geographically? Are you looking to sort of embed more technology, or let's say AI, into the platform? Or are you sort of expanding to different services? Where do you see Matchboard headed in 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, well, COVID definitely shook things up last year, and the positive side to it is that I think it gave everyone an opportunity to really step back and look at their business, and perhaps think of new angles and pivots. In Matchboard's case, we launched last year matchmaking events online, which took our matchmaking concept into a different setting. And basically what we did was we partner with a different vendor each event, and we fill the virtual room, if you like, with potential clients for them. Right. So we match make the vendor to the job title, the company size, the industry that they want to target. And we get anywhere between 10 and 30 executives in these virtual matchmaking events environments. So that's one of the new things we launched. And once we launched it, it just went berserk. So that's something we're absolutely going to grow in 2021. One of the interesting differentiators for our events is we run them at lunchtime. So we actually send a gourmet lunch to the home office or the office of each attendee for them to enjoy during the presentation. And it sort of starts off the event on a really fun note where people hold up their lunch to the camera, and we do a bit of networking before the presentation kicks off. And so I really think we've got quite a unique event concept, but probably what's most unusual about it and what's disruptive is that the events industry generally, for these sort of executive roundtable style events, charges per event. You know, you'll ask an event organizer to put together an event, they'll go to their marketing database and they'll do that for you. In Matchboard's case, we charge half the fee of any other events organizer, and then we take a success fee if the vendor wins business from it. So again, we're backing ourselves with a success fee, which we obviously carried over from our online matching model. And so the vendors love that because, again, they're used to paying for trade shows and business events and conferences, conference sponsorships that cost an absolute fortune. And more often than not, people would walk away and they would question, was that really worth it? Probably we won't do that next year. And I heard that a lot. And so the online events was something great to come out of COVID for us that we're going to grow in 2021. And you also mentioned geographical expansion. So we have developed a licensing model to take our platform international. So we are actually actively looking. We've only just started the search in the Asia-Pac region for a company that may want to operate this exact model in their region and have exclusive rights to that region. We already started that model in the UK. And so we have a developing business over there. But really, the world's our oyster. I think after 8 years, we've got a really proven story. So being an online business, there's no barriers in developing this in other countries. That definitely is a growth opportunity. Apart from that, I think we'll just pursue double-digit growth for our core business. Half of which comes through SEO and content marketing. So we'll very much continue the emphasis on that.
That's fantastic. In fact, I mean, just a couple of observations. For the first thing that you mentioned, maybe because I've not had my breakfast yet, is when you talk about the gourmet lunch being sent, that just paints such a lovely picture of, building a community. So I think everything that you've said today so far, it just gives me a sense that, you do, sort of run your business from the heart. And in the sense, it's not always about, this is how the world does the business and that's how we should do it too. And, and that's my first observation. It just gives a sense of a community in the sense, a truly collaborative environment where suppliers and, all the businesses come together and they are sort of, tied together with this common thread, which is Matchboard. And the other thing, that comes to mind when you spoke about, the speed dating model in a way, is the fact that, yes, absolutely. We have been to conferences and I have promised myself never to go again. And some of the most hyped events in our industry, technology and fintech and this and that. And you go there and you have like 10 people who are talking about their own companies and have their own agendas. And then, yes, there is a very boring and mundane networking session where nobody really networks and they're on their phones. And then you're like, can't wait to get out of this place. So I think the way you describe your virtual conference or the virtual event is a lot more appealing. And in fact, I'm going to check back with you when we can attend one of those later.
Okay, sounds good, Abhii.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I wanted to ask, and since you mentioned, the franchise model, is the fact that do you see that, because a lot of businesses that we speak with and a lot of businesses that, we work with as our clients, as our partners, they're all trying to scale up and they all try to think about, franchising model. So how do you sort of advise them in terms of, how do you build some intellectual property? Do you have very clear guidelines or SOPs? How do you ensure that level of quality across regions? And so, what have been your own preparations going into this exercise?
Well, I have to admit I'm on a learning curve myself, so I won't say that I know it all. But yeah, look, it's very important to have documentation of the processes, the standard email responses, and sort of provide almost a manual to your partner rather than just take the license fee and say away you go. I think the biggest mistake people can make is underestimating the time and effort involved. Certainly in my case with the UK, I did think that within a few months I would be able to hand over and just operate hands-free. But what I found was, in the first year with the licensee we had, it was, every couple of days, calls after hours. It was, when flights were available, it was going across to London and spending time away from the family. You've got to think about, are you willing to make those commitments? Because going global is very glamorous.
Yeah.
And it sounds good. And definitely if you can crack it, it's a big plus in terms of the valuation of your business and all those things. But it is incredibly hard work. Yeah. And particularly the first year. And so, I would not attempt to do 5 markets in the same year sort of thing. 1 or 2 would be the absolute maximum. Otherwise, you can't do justice. So as ambitious and as fast moving as I like to be, I think you've really got to bed down those relationships and be prepared to put in a massive effort.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, it's a learning curve. It's always a learning curve for an entrepreneur and a founder. And I'm sure whatever your experiences are from the UK experience, you can take a lot of them into other markets as well. Some of the things, like you said, you might not have anticipated. The other thing I always say to budding entrepreneurs is that there's no such thing as a side gig. People have this very, sort of glamorized idea in their heads about I'll start a business and then within a few months there'll be Series A or pre-Series A and then we'll be sitting on $100 million company and then I'll exit and I'll be sipping martinis and smoking Cuban cigars. And that
not
never
quite like that, is it?
Not at all. Either it's not or we've been doing it wrong all along. But yeah, absolutely. It's a learning curve, and you got to enjoy that process as well. And yeah, I get what you mean. About not expanding too aggressively and not going into sort of multiple markets as well. So yeah, I hope you can expand to multiple markets rather quickly, and yeah, it will definitely be a huge sort of stimulant to your valuation as well. Now, in terms of you talked about earlier, in our conversation, this whole concept of companies with SEOs, SEO optimization and, who are running Google ads. And now there's so much emphasis on content marketing, on search engines, and of course on social media as well. Now, obviously, a lot of our, clients and a lot of businesses that we are trying to help through this podcast are, businesses which are B2B businesses that are trying to generate leads. How do you see, the future of lead gen, right? In the sense, we've spoken with a lot of businesses. There was a time when outbound really used to help, and now there's been such a emphasis on inbound. People are doing content marketing, but it doesn't always work for smaller companies. They don't have dedicated, content writers. They don't have, people who are generating blogs and resources and ebooks and all of those, things. So of course there is Matchboard. So no doubt about that. But let's say, other than Matchboard, is there anything that you would recommend to smaller businesses in terms of how they should generate leads for their B2B businesses?
Mm. Yes, well, certainly when you're a small business, you've usually got a lean budget and you've got to be creative and think outside the box. SEO worked for me, I guess, at least in the beginning, because I enjoy business writing. And so I could do that, but I recognize that a lot of people don't have that skill. So apart from SEO, which by the way is becoming much harder than it used to be.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are a billion blogs out there in blogosphere, and the number of organic appearances in search results is shrinking as there are more ads appearing. So yeah, you've got to look beyond that. But I would say there's no one silver bullet. You've really got to have a multi-pronged strategy. Something that worked very well for Matchboard is, well, there are a couple of things. One is PR. So getting in a story into the media, whether it's starting off with a small niche trade publication or whether it's a mainstream daily news media outlet, I think easier than people think, actually. A lot of people are scared by approaching media, but the journalists and the editors, they need content. They're hungry for good stories. So it's actually a symbiotic thing. If you can provide them that, then it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So it's just a case of working out what do readers want, and pitching editors. Don't be afraid, would be my advice, to contact some big publications, but just don't make it long-winded. Get straight to the point. And no one's interested if, XYZ company grew 30% in the last month. You've got to understand what is a newsworthy story, what appeals to readers, often things with emotional content. The story of a first-generation immigrant, self-made success, who's changed people's lives in some way. That sort of thing appeals. Okay, so apart from PR, one of the strategies, at least for a B2B business, that I've found extremely successful is LinkedIn. And everyone's heard of LinkedIn, but it's the way you use it. So I think of it as a free lunch, because without paying for advertising, you can achieve so much on that platform. Building followers, building your brand, both personal brand and your company brand. And when I look at how Matchboard wins its business, I factor that LinkedIn accounts for about 10% of our leads that come through. And when I look at the amount of time I spend personally on LinkedIn, the ROI is absolutely there, but it's not something you can just put your profile up and forget. You have to invest in it. So again, it comes down to where people spend their time. Apart from PR and LinkedIn, I would say just keeping front of mind is important. So for me, it's as simple as a monthly newsletter, and inevitably we get repeat business or new business through that. We have several thousand subscribers. As much as people may love you, they forget about you. And it's no hard feelings, but you've got to stay front of mind. So it doesn't take that much to put together a newsletter using a simple template. And I'm sure digital agencies like yours can help, Abhii. But I do believe that ongoing engagement is important. And cross-selling and upselling to existing clients is a faster way to grow your business than trying to attract new ones.
Absolutely. I mean, I must say that's the best piece of advice I've heard in a very, very long time. I mean, the way you summarized and crystallized it is, something I'm sure, the listeners of the podcast would be very grateful for, because those are the kind of things that, sometimes you take 15 years to learn, right? Doing it the hard way, the lovely combination of PR and again, you rightly pointed out how people are scared and people feel they are not important enough, and they have this mystical idea of what the editors and journalists want and whether we are worthy of that content or not. So that's fabulous. And LinkedIn, of course, there are so many founders, entrepreneurs, marketing managers, and marketing directors out there who are not really utilizing LinkedIn as well as they could have, right? So, and of course, and the other thing that I always keep telling my team and some of our clients is we have to stay relevant, right? Something that you pointed out in terms of, out of sight is out of mind. And it's not about, and not to take it personally, but the fact is the clients are, running businesses as well. In fact, we were speaking to one of our, old clients, and we said, hey, we haven't done any business together. And, then, we were assuming things about, well, they don't like us anymore. What's happened? Whatever. We are trying to introspect. Did we do anything wrong? Have we not been servicing them well? And then we just realized there have been massive organizational changes in the company, and, people are still trying to figure out what they are doing. There's a lot of chaos there. So it had nothing to do with us. And all it did was reach out to them. We sent out a newsletter, and 3 days later, one of them reached out and said, hey, what are we doing for 2021? So invaluable piece of advice. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, just staying in front of people, whether it's a newsletter or LinkedIn. And also, you can make a list each month of a small group of clients you just want to check in with. I mean, what better time than the new year to check in with people, see, how they fared during the COVID crisis, and position yourself as wanting to be helpful. Is there any way we can work together to help you in 2021? And people are very ready to have those conversations. So again, be proactive would be the best advice.
Absolutely. And being proactive also comes from, empathy and compassion. A lot of it, a lot of what I heard from you today seems to stem from that as well. So I think that genuine desire to help companies and people is, and in fact, it's been our observation, and we just realized, like for instance, when we hire project managers or account managers, and over the years, we've tried a lot of, they should know this much about technology. They should have been developers themselves or programmers themselves, or they should have been business analysts or not. And finally, after so many years of so many trial and error sort of techniques, what we finally come to the conclusion, and maybe we'll continue learning here as well, is the fact that the only thing that's required is some degree of emotional intelligence, right? So just very commonsensical things to do, and just reach out to your clients and say, hey, is there anything I can do to help? And I heard you were, a bit unhappy about something that transpired between you and our technology team. Is there anything I can do to assist? So yeah, just these small little things which are becoming more and more rare these days, and what we try to inculcate in our teams as well, in terms of, try to understand, try to help people. And it's not just, and pick up the phone and call them. It's nice to actually meet people and speak to them when there's no pandemic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if COVID taught us anything, I think it's to be more human. And that's a great thing in business. I personally have noticed I start my emails off differently since COVID. You just want to check in first and see how people are doing. You want to show some thought about them as a person. Everyone's a human at the end of the day, even though they may be part of a business. So you've got to treat them as such.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, as we say again, people buy from people and not from companies and organizations. So it's so important to have that sort of human interaction, that connection, and something that everything that you said about whether it's your events or just the very premise of the business model. It sounds like you start and plan things based on this desire to actually help people, and I think it's so wonderful to actually hear about an organization that's happy to be paid for results, and not just about, hey, we are doing you a big favor. Every lead we generate, you got to pay for that. So we'll do everything we can to evangelize Matchboard. I think it's absolutely a wonderful concept, and great success, and very, very well deserved. So, I mean, the final question that I would like to ask you before we let you go is, you speak 5 languages. You mentioned that you do business writing as well. And is there something that Sharon can't do? And secondly, what's next for Sharon personally? I mean, is it a sixth country to live in? Is it another venture? Is it something non-business related, something that you're looking forward to in 2021?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. There are so many things I am hopeless at and don't know about, which I would love to get into with time. Having learnt foreign languages, I guess, and now, running a technology-based business, it would sort of be a natural evolution for me to learn a computer language. So I'm actually thinking about doing that, and trying to decide which one, because there's a lot out there, and there seems to be a new language popping up every year.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's one thing, and just learning more about the relationship between AI and humans, because I've always been such a believer in the human connection. And then like in my more young, naive years, I thought of technology as, someone opening up a computer and fiddling around with a motherboard, or opening the bonnet of a car and looking at the engine and all that boring stuff. But when you think about what technology can achieve, whether it's saving people's lives or lifting people from poverty, and if you focus on those outcomes, technology is such an amazing thing. So I have a mission this year to sort of read up more about that relationship between humans and AI, which I think will help create a better tomorrow. But I want to learn more. So that's one of my goals.
I mean, I must say that was totally unexpected. and and again, you sort of continue to surprise us, and it's wonderful. In fact, you've given me the topic for our next conversation. So next time we have our podcast with you, we are going to talk about the relationship between artificial intelligence and humans. And in the meantime, we wish you all the best for 2021, and congratulations on all the success, Sharon. It was wonderful having you here on the podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.